Hello everyone. Welcome back to my channel, where I explore fascinating historical events and figures. Today, I am going to talk about one of the most remarkable moments in history, the life and death of the great philosopher, Socrates. His story teaches us about integrity, wisdom, and how to face death with grace. So, let's dive into the final moments of Socrates' life, and his last words. Socrates, the great philosopher, was sentenced to death by the Athenian court. The death sentence was to be carried out that evening, and according to the customs of the time, his family and close disciples gathered around him in his dark prison cell. The chief jailer came to bid him farewell, with tears in his eyes. What an ironic punishment this was! The one who was to die remained calm and composed, while the one who had to execute the death sentence was shedding tears. The head jailer spoke to Socrates, "O, great son of Athens, please do not curse me. I am just carrying out my duty." Over the years, he had never seen anyone as courageous, honest, and wise as Socrates. Before his death, Socrates instructed his family, including the women and children, to leave. He then dressed himself in fine clothes. His disciples were sobbing uncontrollably, but Socrates remained calm, unaffected by the imminent death. Socrates was charged with corrupting the youth, impiety, introducing new gods, and conspiring against the state. His trial took place in an open field, presided over by 500 of Athens' most learned citizens, many of whom were loyal to the king. They despised Socrates' intellectual influence, especially on the younger generation, and they were determined to get rid of him. Socrates could have easily avoided death, but he chose not to. Even in the face of the death penalty, he mocked his accusers and judges. His courage and wit overwhelmed them to the point that they could not answer any of his probing questions during the trial. But, as a result, he was condemned to death by drinking a poison called hemlock. For the entire month he was imprisoned, Socrates remained firm in his beliefs. During this time, even the guards were moved by his wisdom and tried to help him escape. But Socrates refused, saying, "If I escape now, history will call me a coward." He believed that a death in honor was far superior to a life of disgrace. And so, on the evening of his execution, the jailer arrived with a cup of hemlock. Socrates looked at the jailer and calmly asked him, "What should I do with it?" The jailer replied, "You must drink the entire cup. You cannot waste a single drop." Socrates, without hesitation, drank the poison, as though it were mere water. The disciples around him wept, unable to accept the reality of his death. The jailer, following the instructions, told Socrates to walk around for a while so that the poison could spread through his body. And while his disciples cried, Socrates stood up, weak on his feet, and walked slowly. As he walked, he uttered his famous words, "I have followed the law my entire life. Why would I break the law in death?" After walking for as long as he could, Socrates lay down on his bed. He told his disciples not to mourn loudly. "Let me die in peace," he said. The jailer, even with a hardened heart, could not help but show respect. He bowed his head, and Socrates covered his face with a cloth. Socrates, before his final breath, told one of his disciples to return a borrowed rooster to his neighbor. Then, he passed away. When the news of his death spread throughout Athens, the people were enraged. They marched in protest, and many of the judges who had sentenced Socrates were brutally punished. Some even took their own lives in regret. This was the end of Socrates, but not the end of his influence. His teachings were immortalized by his disciple Plato, who wrote about him in his famous work The Republic. Plato's student, Aristotle, went on to become another great philosopher, and his influence reached even further through his student, Alexander the Great. In the grand scheme of things, Socrates' death may have been a mockery of justice, but he did not die in vain. Through his wisdom, He lives on in the hearts and minds of his followers, a beacon of truth and integrity. Thank you for watching. Socrates' story reminds us that wisdom, truth, and honor are the greatest legacies a person can leave behind. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories from history. Until next time, stay curious and keep seeking knowledge.